Hello, everybody. I'm honored and delighted to be here. It's a wonderful city, beautiful place to be, and I have the great opportunity, and I'm going to figure out how to use this clicker, to present to you Metropolitan Park. And this is really a team effort that we've worked on here. Thomas is here. He's the local landscape architect. Antoinette and Foster & Partners, Arup, Lambda, working with them specifically on the design, and many other consultants to make sure that this is really going to be an incredible place. You can see here that it's between the mountains and the sea, so it's really a spectacular location. I'm from, and my office is Melendrez, is in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is the sister city for Athens. I don't know if you all knew that. But we share one thing that we call a Mediterranean climate, although we're nowhere near you. And we have an ocean, we have mountains, and we have rain in the wintertime and none in the summer. So we have a lot in common. I'm going to show you a couple park projects. One you'll know very well and one probably not. This is in the city of Seattle, the land of Starbucks, I think is one you might know. Amazon.com and Boeing airplanes. Love airplanes. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is a project that we did on the waterfront that is a case of what a park can do for a city. We turned it into a park. This was a derelict site that had sat fallow for quite a while. And when the park was built, the whole neighborhood changed. There were new shops, there were new residential towers, and it continues to happen in the city. And on opening day, if you can imagine, in January in Seattle, and there happened to be sunlight on that day, which is really rare in the wintertime there, many, many people came to see the park. And because parks are really, really important, I think, in dense living conditions. You all know Central Park, probably. And this was a similar type operation where there was a site in the middle of Manhattan that was derelict, not used much, and kind of a waste in a way. They went ahead and built a park that the city no longer could live without. You can imagine the designer, the architect working on the project, imagine this when they started it, like we are today. There's bicycle, there's activities, and there's just one very important thing. It's called respite. There's a break from you guys have a very busy city. I mean, it is so busy. I cannot imagine, the intensity that you live with every day. So the idea of building a park where that can all change for the moment, for the break. I think that's what Olmsted had in mind for Central Park. Okay, does size matter? To some of you, yes. And some of you are smiling. Let me show you. Metropolitan Park is 200 hectares. This is a very, very large park. Central Park is 340. Hyde Park in London is 142. Let's skip down to the National Gardens, one place I love to walk through, 16 hectares. Olympic Sculpture Park that I showed you was only 4 hectares. And a very famous park in the United States now is Highline Park's only 2 hectares. So it's quality. It's not always how much, it's how well you make it. And that's our goal here. But 200 acres is enormous for park space. Okay. Some comparisons of other parks superimposed over the site. You can see Hyde Park and also Central Park. And then your local parks transposed on the site. Our park, Metropolitan Park, is actually a little larger than the 3 parks put together, which you can see. Antonis Tritis, I can't even speak Greek, I'm trying here. And then Pedion, Arios Park, did I do that okay? Okay, and you can see how they fit on the site, and then you can see our park, Metropolitan Park, and other open spaces that I'll talk to you here in just a second. So there's our 200 hectares of park, and the rendering here shows the diversity of landscape that will be in this park. It won't be all one solid green. It will be a variety of spaces, and it'll take advantage of the seasons and the ecology of the site. But on top of that, the added open space that go in this project, another 145 hectares, is if you add these two together, the park and the open space, it's larger than Central Park in this area. So that's a pretty big deal, I think. When we looked at the park, I came here and walked with Thomas throughout different parts of up the Acropolis and all the other places around here, and I noticed the agora, and saw that it was low, sunk down, and that you were digging it up again, you know, and trying to rediscover it. The culture of this city is amazing, and when we're looking at the design of this park, that's paramount. How people will use the park, what you want to do in the park. You don't have a history of the big parks here, and this will be new. And there will be a lot of familiar things in this park. So we're going to ensure that the culture is part of it. I mentioned the agora before. Archaeology is something you can't forget about when you come to this place. The sense of ruins, I know you see them every day. You have restaurants by them. They're beautiful places. And we began to see some of the history of the site like in archaeology. For example, the airport itself and all its concrete. If we can bury it, which is allowed to do with any ruin, it can be under there and be safe. It can be there forever, and our plants that grow will be happy. If you look in the mountains around here, there's rock and there's trees all over these places. So the plants you have here that are native to the area will be very happy to live on top of the concrete. That's really true. So the archaeology also, the history of the 2004 Olympics is very important, and we're going to capture that for the park. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And the airplanes. You know, they're amazing. There isn't many projects you can go to where you can find airplanes just sitting there. Have you all seen the airplanes? Do you remember they're out there? They're really cool. So I got to use my hands here for a second, just like Shannon did in my office. But do I have it right? This way. Okay. It's probably the other way when you're looking at it. But the idea for the park, for the landform, is to dig out a portion of the park, take that material, put it here to raise the topography so it's different, and then to keep the relative flatness of the existing airport intact. Okay, does that make sense? That's kind of the way we're going to move Earth around on the park. The park is basically connected to all the neighborhoods. You can go through it in many, many places. The water can go through it. But does this have a pointer? Aha, okay. This is the airport, the main runway. Now you're going to see how much coffee I've been drinking, because I'll wiggle. That's the main airport. This is the domestic airport right there. And those lines are met by another pedestrian connection. And that's the new line that's brought into the park. It's a pedestrian connection from the mountainside down to the waterfront. And what happens when those three lines intersect, they're all pedestrian, is where the Olympic symbol is right there today. It's really interesting that those ended up in that place. So that's the basic framework for the park. We imagine, like you saw before, views into the park will be inviting. There will be activities. There will be places to have coffee. There will be museums. There will be skateboarding. You can imagine all the possibilities that could be in a park of this size. Again, we saw this earlier, looking down from above. The pedestrian path that's coming down from by the mountain down to the waterfront will have a slight move up and down as it moves down, whereas the airport runway is very, very smooth and steady. So you can imagine it that way. The skin that covers the park is familiar landscapes that you'll all recognize. There's the hills and meadows on this side. Familiar with that? We'll have quite a lot of that on the park. Then there will be the wetlands where we're doing the excavation. And that will look a little bit like the National Gardens in terms of richness and wetness and greenness there. And then you'll have the woodlands, which are more of the drier woodlands, the pines and the oaks, that will inhabit lots of the other edges and places in the park. And we saw this slide before. It's really a lot of parks. There's 9 different sectors right now in the design. Each of them has a different characteristic. I'll show you in a minute. This is what we call Olympic Place in urban agriculture. You can imagine a farmer's market on the old runway right here, orchard, even a wheat field. And this is where the Olympic symbol is that I mentioned before. You can imagine what could be there. People could grow their own food. The trees will have food. And then there's what we call the athletics area. It wraps around the water park. You'll have many fields, a new, almost like a, how would you say that? Like a coliseum, a mini coliseum, not a big one, but a great place for track and field to occur. Other small fields that we'll use and big soccer fields here, and facilities. I'll show you in the slide here. Interior parts of recreation. The nature area, I mentioned again, we'll be digging down in this area. We'll have a permanent lake right here and an ephemeral lake here like the water is when the rains stop. They will dry up a little bit, but this lake will be there year-round. Oops. This lake will be here year-round. These are the existing fields that will be retained, and they can become picnic areas, places to kick a ball, but they're remnants of the Olympics. There you'll learn about nature, you'll learn about the animals and plants that are part of your landscape, and you'll meet friends. The sculpture park is a big centerpiece in the park, and it's really the casual walking place. It's where you'll discover maybe amazing pieces of art, world-renowned, from people that are just getting famous or people that are just getting started with their artwork, and their sculptures will be part of this park. The exhibition area is one of my personal favorites because I love airplanes. And that's the Aero Saarinen building, and we're going to create a long green sward of grass that stays green year-round that goes to meet the airport right here, the transect. You could have a circus there, you could have a concert. It's meant for major gatherings. It's a flexible open space, and potentially even a silly or interesting, in my opinion, airplane at the entry there. That might be sitting there forever. Kind of a folly. You can see it here. I call it awaiting clearance. It's sort of like the guy was sitting there and it took too long to leave, so they just left the airplane. Trees grew up and they left. Airplanes are beautiful things to get near, and nowadays you can't get near them because they're locked up in airports. So there's the skin again. You can see the variation in colors across the park. You can see the beautiful plants that we'll be using there, ones that you're familiar with, ones that produce food, fall color, seasonal interest. And that's what we hope to build for you. The thing about parks that I really wanted to leave with you is that they're really for everybody. And the location of this park is really spectacular in that there's transportation that can take you anywhere in Athens to this park. It's very, very important that we understand that this great, large park is like the lungs. Let's imagine the Acropolis is the heart. This is the lungs. You have to have two to work. And maybe this will become the lungs. All the trees, all the plants, and all the activities that can happen here will be very memorable. Thank you.